All right, welcome to the Big and SEC podcast. My name's Andy,
And I'm Jason.
and today we're going to talk about the NFL draft that happened in Detroit last week. We're going to pick some players from the SEC and Big Ten that we see as the best fits with their new team. We're also going to look at the best value picks we saw for Big Ten and SEC players. And then we're also going to dive into the new college football NCAA 25 game. News came out that new cover athletes were going to be announced and some details with that. And then we're going to hit you up with a Penn State minute, a Georgia minute, and then a risers and fallers segment on some teams in the SEC. So without further ado, let's get started. Just some stats here from the draft is what we'll get started with. SEC led the way with 60 players selected. Pac-12 came in second with 43 and edged out the Big Ten, who had 42. When I see that stat, what jumps out to me is the Pac-12 and how many players they had selected. Really kind of surprising from how they were 2 years ago, and now they passed the Big Ten with talent there. Pac-12 went out with a bang. What do you think, Jay?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And then, there's no surprise with Michigan as the reigning national champion. They led with 13 players selected, followed by Texas and Alabama with 11 and 10. And then I think Washington had 10 as well. So it's obviously pretty not surprising with all the playoff teams with the most selected. But like I said, the most, surprising was like the 14 or 15 straight offensive players drafted without a defensive player was pretty crazy to see.
Right. I think it's kind of a shift in priorities in the NFL. It's more the defenses are pretty solid, so the offenses need to step up. Also, I think we need to throw in Florida State was up there with 10 players as well. So, you kind of had all four playoff teams and Florida State, who arguably could have been in it as well, led the way with, there's a reason why all those teams were really good this year. Another kind of thing, 6 quarterbacks were taken in the first 12 picks for the first time, 5 from current Big Ten and SEC schools. Obviously, the surprise there was Michael Penix to Atlanta that early when they just signed Kirk Cousins. I know you're an Atlanta fan. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, it was definitely head scratching at first, but you take a deeper dive into it. Most of Cousins' guaranteed money is in the first 2 years. So I think I read something today that if they cut him after 2 years, they only have like 11 million in dead money. And so that means, Penix could sit behind a veteran for 2 years and then it's his team. So I don't think it was as bad of look as people like, but I think a lot of Atlanta fans would have liked to see them try to draft down. But if there's not suitors to draft down, you got to take the guy that you want.
Yeah. And I mean, Cousins is coming off a major injury with the Achilles, so it'll be nice to have a talented person behind him at least. Other than that, I mean, J.J. McCarthy went to Minnesota, Bo Nix went to Denver, and obviously had Caleb Williams, number 1 overall, to Chicago. And then you also...
And one surprising to me was Brock Bowers going to the Raiders because they have that Notre Dame tight end they drafted a few years ago. I don't know his first name, but it's Mayer. And, he's a big body tight end. So it's like, them drafting Brock Bowers, he's going to be more of like a slot guy or like a flex. And I don't know if he has the athletic ability to do that in the NFL. So it was a very surprising pick there.
Yeah, I mean, he ran away from people in college, but as we know, the NFL is a different game. So let's jump into our first kind of segment here with the NFL Draft Best Fits. First up for me, I have Olu Fashanu, the offensive tackle from Penn State, going to the Jets. It's a pick that just makes sense with Aaron Rodgers coming back. He kind of tested the waters toward the end of last season before ultimately deciding not to come in for a game or two and test out that Achilles, but he's supposed to come back with healthy and with a promising year for the Jets, and for the Jets to pick up what could be a franchise left tackle to protect him. I feel like that was a huge get for the Jets, and Olu, gave up one sack in his entire Penn State career. He was kind of the driving force behind the improvement at Penn State for the offensive line, who's always been a weakness at that program. Olu kind of was the pillar there that got Penn State to the next level on the offensive line, at least. So I really liked seeing him go to the Jets, and it really made a lot of sense.
Yeah, absolutely, and I agree with that. And my best fit follows that same suit with Amarius Mims, out of Georgia. Also an offensive tackle. He's going to Cincinnati. They got to protect Burrow. That is the number one priority over there in Cincinnati, is to keep that guy healthy, because you had another season-ending injury. It's just, you got to protect him, and they've made that a priority there.
Yeah, I seen some graphic about how 3 of the offensive linemen at the Bengals are like above 6'7" and 330. So they just have these giant bodies there to protect Burrow now.
Yeah, and some people thought that Mims was going to fall a little deeper just because of his injury. He didn't play a whole lot this last year at Georgia, but Georgia is always a very top 3 offensive lineman team.
Yeah. My best fit, number 2, I have Cooper DeJean, the corner out of Iowa, who ended up going to the Eagles. We all know the Eagles' secondary was the weak spot last year on that defense and for the team in general, and kind of held them back from their Super Bowl title aspirations. Cooper DeJean was, arguably the best corner in this draft, especially before his injury. Also can add a punt returner element to that. As we've seen, he's scored touchdowns on returns there. And I just see it as a really good fit for the Eagles to add Cooper DeJean and get him in that secondary.
Yeah, they need some physicality in their secondary, and I think he definitely brings it. And Iowa's been a proven, they can develop players to compete at the NFL level for sure. My number 2 best fit would be Xavier Worthy, wide receiver out of Texas, going to the Chiefs. I see him being a Tyreek Hill 2.0 for Patrick Mahomes, and just definitely the speedy, shifty guy that they want, that, once Mahomes scrambles, he'll get open.
Yeah, and he set the record at the combine for 40 time, right?
Yep.
I think that's what,
exactly.
Yeah. I mean, it's the rich get richer. So the Chiefs, who couldn't find a good receiver all season, now get somebody to blow the top off the defense. Fastest player technically in history. I don't know if he plays that fast, but definitely if you're not a fan of the Chiefs, you're going to look at that and, like I said, the rich get richer, and now you're giving Mahomes back that big play threat he lost when Tyreek Hill left. My best fit, number 3, is going to be Blake.
I said he's gonna play immediately, because, like you said, they needed another guy, and they thought it was going to be Kadarius Toney, and he just had so many drops. But now Rashee Rice might be getting suspended a couple games coming into the season because of that car crash or whatever he was involved in. So, like I said, you're going to see him early and often.
Yeah, the Rice racing his Lamborghini. I've seen that he might be suspended for the first half of the season. So they're definitely going to need somebody to step up for however long he's suspended for. And then once everybody gets back, I mean, like you said, he can blow the top off the defense there. My best fit, number 3, I'm going to go with Blake Corum, the running back from Michigan, going to the Rams. As we could see last year, it looks like McVay has a very running back friendly system, and Blake Corum, he can break tackles, he can get out in space, he can, make the big play when he is got a little bit of blocking. And with the Rams and McVay's system, I think that's a really good fit, because we know he can catch the ball out of the backfield and he can hit a hole and be elusive. So I look at Blake Corum being a pretty good fit there for the Rams.
Yeah, I like Blake Corum. I just don't know He's a little bit undersized for the NFL, so I just don't know how well that transition will go for him. But like you said, if he just kind of sees, you know, passing downs, third down kind of back, he'll probably still be productive. My third best fit would be Terry and Arnold out of Alabama, a DB for the Lions. Um, Lions had a heck of a season last year, and that was one of their downfalls was their secondary, and they obviously made that a priority in this draft. They drafted Terry and Arnold, in the late. Actually, they traded up to like 22, 23 to grab him, and then in the second round they drafted another DB. So I think that's a great fit for them.
Yeah, it's kind of that need and fit. They're filling a big need there with their defense. And, obviously he's talented enough to be a first round corner. So, he's definitely going to be a big playmaker for them. With that, let's move on to our best value picks that we have. I'll get started. Jerzon Newton for Illinois, defensive tackle, went to the Commanders 36th overall. I mean, all season he was kind of regarded as the top interior defensive lineman and did nothing during the season that said he wasn't. He dominated games. When I went to the Penn State Illinois game, I mean, that guy was everywhere. He was in the backfield all game. So seeing him fall to the second round at 36th pick was kind of surprising to me. And I feel like the Washington Commanders got a really good value there.
Yeah, for sure. I honestly was hoping that that would have been an Atlanta pick because their defensive line needs help, but taken just before him, so that didn't happen. But I would say my first best value would be Javon Bullard, safety out of Georgia. He picked 58 overall to Green Bay. They notably have a good defense, but I think that he has a chance to start day one and help that secondary in Green Bay. He also teams up with the old Georgia teammate with Eric Stokes, and then obviously playing opposite of Jerry Alexander. So I think that was a good pick for them and good value where they got him.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Bullard was all over the field for Georgia, and every game you knew kind of where he was at. My best value number 2, I'm going to go with Troy Franklin, the wide receiver out of Oregon. He fell all the way to the third round to Denver, gets to team up with teammate Bo Nix, which is really cool. Troy Franklin, I mean, there were so many good receivers in this draft that you can't really go wrong with, anybody selected in the first 3 rounds. Any of them could be, big time number 1 receivers. I like the Troy Franklin pick because, I mean, he was really explosive, and now he has that chemistry with Bo Nix already. So if they're going to start Bo Nix from the get, which you're probably going to instead of Zach Wilson, I think it gives Bo Nix kind of a security blanket that he had in college. So I really like that pick for Denver.
Yeah, and it's always convenient for that, to have that chemistry coming in, helping with that transition to the NFL. I think it definitely makes a difference. I would say my second best value pick would be A.D. Mitchell out of Texas, picked 52 for the Colts. It's just another weapon for the Colts. They have Pittman, but they need somebody else. And I think A.D. Mitchell he's a great playmaker, and I think people kind of overlook the fact that he played in he played in 2 national championship games for Alabama, and then he transferred to Texas this last year and made the playoffs. So, he's all about big games. He can he can go out and make the play.
Yeah, he's a winner, being with Georgia and then Texas, making it to the college football playoffs. I think it was 3 years in a row, 2 with Georgia, 1 with Texas. So, I mean, he's been around winning. And then with getting Anthony Richardson back, and I mean, he could be a really big target for a young quarterback, because Anthony Richardson had the injury, so he's not, a full veteran yet, but seeing how explosive and good the offense was when he was there, it's good that they added another weapon there. My best value number 3, I'm going to go back to Penn State and Theo Johnson, the tight end. The Giants got him 107th overall in the third round. I know Theo Johnson, he's not only is he's a big target for the red zone, but he also opens up the running game and was very integral in Penn State's rushing attack. I know that's not what people want to hear, but he's a great run blocker, and with how big he is, he's just going to be a giant target for Daniel Jones in the red zone.
Yeah, absolutely. And those big body physical tight ends have success in the NFL. It's not the speedy guys because like you said, like I said, Brock Bowers, he's running away from guys in college. I don't know if he'll be able to do that in the NFL. So, being that big body and be able to kind of bully your way to get open or just to help in the run block is huge. My third best value would be Javon Foster, right tackle out of Missouri, picked at 114 for the Jaguars. I think it brings a little depth to their offensive line, and I honestly wouldn't be surprised if he started at right tackle for them. He's a big-bodied guy. He's quick with his feet. I think with a little bit more development, and I think he'll be a really stable, safe pick for them.
Yeah, always good to get your franchise quarterback a staple at one of the tackles with Trevor Lawrence, who, he's been injury prone the last few years. So to shore up the offensive line is always going to be a great idea. Another player I wanted to call out that's not really on the list because I don't know how good he is anymore is Kalen King, the corner from Penn State. He was regarded as, one of the top corners before the season began. Kind of got exposed a little bit, and it was really surprising to see him drop all the way down to the seventh round, almost the third to last pick to Green Bay. There is really surprising to see that fall. He opted out of the bowl game to supposedly, keep his draft stock up, and he fell all the way down to he almost didn't get drafted. I don't know if you had anybody that you can think of that really fell for you that you thought would be taken a lot higher.
Not too much, not really, not right off the top of my head anyways.
Okay. I know I kind of just threw that at you without any planning, so sorry about that.
That's all right.
All right, let's move on to the new video game that is highly anticipated. I know I can't wait. I'm waiting to buy a PlayStation 5 just for this game. New NCAA 25 is going to come out. There's multiple reports out there that there's going to be multiple versions of the game with multiple cover athletes. Caveats are all cover athletes are going to be current players, and all cover athletes are going to play different positions. Now, there's a varying number of how many versions they said. I've seen 4, I've seen 6, so it's really hard to tell how many actual versions there are going to be. But it's pretty cool that they're going to make it current players, so you're actually playing with the cover athlete, which you've never been able to do in the past because of NIL.
Yeah, and I've actually seen a couple articles that think that they might do it like regionally, which I don't see happening just because of the digital world is so big. It doesn't make sense. Like there's no way that you can really do it that way. But something I didn't realize that they did in previous years was because like I've always been a PlayStation guy, so I didn't know that they had like different covers for Xbox. Like back when the game like in process. So like me and a buddy was talking about it, and he's like, "Oh yeah, X and X, so and so is on the cover." I'm like, "No, he wasn't. Like he was never on a cover." And it's like because Xbox had their own and PlayStation had their own. So I'm curious on if that may be a determining factor with this, like with my list and your list, is like maybe there's a PlayStation list and maybe there's an Xbox list.
Yeah, it's very possible. I think like the regional would have worked out, 6 years ago back in the PlayStation 3 days where you pretty much had to go get the physical copy from your local store and, load it that way. But with anymore, everybody's just going to download it. So that doesn't make much sense. So yeah, let's jump into like some guesses here just per position, not necessarily like who's going to be there. So who do you got?
Yeah, I'll start off with quarterback. I think Quinn Ewers is a shoo-in to be on this game. He's coming back to Texas. He could have easily got drafted this year. With all the quarterbacks that went, he definitely would have been up there, but he's coming back to Texas. I think he's just a huge name, huge popularity. I'd be surprised to not see him on a cover.
Nice, nice. I just seen a gnat fly through my camera. I don't know if you caught. My quarterback, I have Shadur Sanders from Colorado just for the marketing and advertising part of it. I think quarterback could go to Shadur, who's obviously making big noise right now with, the fiasco going on at Colorado with, the transfer portal and some weird stuff going on in Colorado. Deion Sanders is, clapping back personally on Twitter, and it's just a weird situation over in Colorado. But with Shadur, you have the he's more marketable than Quinn Ewers. He's got more personality, more brand than Quinn Ewers. So I could definitely see EA go the Shadur route, and it'd be a good choice. I mean, why wouldn't you? If you're trying to sell the most copies, Shadur is going to be polarizing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Moving on to running back, I feel like there's only one true answer for the running back position, and that'd be Ollie Gordon out of Oklahoma State for the Big 12 conference. Because that was another thing, was that they're supposed to spread it out as all Power 4 conferences now. So I think that would be a big addition for the Big 12 is Ollie Gordon.
Yeah, that's who I have too, is Ollie Gordon the second from Oklahoma State. I mean, if you're looking across the landscape, I really don't see he's the best running back in the nation. So if you're going purely off talent and who's the best, he's the obvious choice. I mean, if you're looking at other ones, Trayvon Henderson could be a pick, or Quidson Jenkins from Ohio State, just because of the pull Ohio State has nationally. I really don't see Donovan Edwards with the down season he had last year getting it. Penn State has a couple studs, but they split time, so they're not super marketable, or they're not going to put up huge stats.
Yeah.
So if you look across the landscape, I mean, the only one that's really going to put up huge stats is Ollie Gordon.
Yeah, and like you said, I get the Henderson and Judkins, but like you said, they're going to split time. Mm-hmm. So the only thing I could see is maybe Judkins gets it, just as because he was one of the biggest transfer names in this transfer portal. So if they're trying, because they said that the transfer portal and NIL is supposed to be a part of the game as well, that maybe they use that as a transparency of using the transfer portal as a popularity thing. So maybe he gets on it that way.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to see how they incorporate transfer portal and NIL into the game. For wide receiver, I'm just going to go ahead here. I picked Emeka Egbuka from Ohio State. Once again, Ohio State's is one of the biggest programs in the nation. He's arguably the best wide receiver coming back. I know there's a ton of good receivers, but Emeka Egbuka probably has one of the highest ceilings and highest expectations. So I could definitely see him being in the running for the wide receiver position if that's one of the positions EA is going for.
Yeah, absolutely. He's following in the footsteps of Marvin Harrison. And he's paired up with Caleb Downs too there at Ohio State. So I've seen his name thrown around a couple times too. I actually went back to the SEC for our wide receiver in Luther Burden out of Missouri. He had a really quiet season 2 years ago, but then he blew up last year. He just is a playmaker. He gets up and gets the ball. Highly recruited, and I just think he's a good candidate for the wide receiver spot there.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many receivers across the nation that it could be. I mean, every really good team has that number one receiver, so there's so many choices for wide receiver that I don't think you can go wrong with hardly any of them.
Absolutely. And looking at both our list, I included a tight end as in my position. I see that you didn't. I just see that they could add the tight end position with some of the bigger names that have been around college football, with Brock Bowers being huge the last 3 years. You got Colson Loveland in Michigan. Like you said, you had Mike Mayer a few years ago. So I added Colson Loveland from Michigan as a Big Ten, reigning national champs. They gotta have a representation on that game. So that's who I picked, and that's why I think he definitely is one of the top tight ends coming back. That will be in college football this next year.
Yeah, just give me the Iowa tight end, whoever it is.
Yeah.
No clue who it's going to be this year, but just the Iowa tight end. But also Georgia's got the Delp guy coming back, right?
Yeah, Oscar Delp. Yep, he filled in for Brock when he got hurt, kind of late in the season. We also got a really good transfer from Stanford, Yusuf Steph. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, but he is a big-bodied guy. He's a little bit smaller than Darnell Washington, who played at Georgia a couple years ago. Very comparable to him, and I'm excited to see him play too.
Yeah, yeah. If we're gonna go official, I'm just gonna put Iowa tight end.
All right.
For D line, I'm gonna go James Pierce Jr. from Tennessee, arguably the top edge rusher in the nation, getting after the quarterback. Also, it'd be my first SEC kind of pick, so I could see James Pierce Jr., especially, Tennessee is a big program with a lot of fans as well, so I could see how James Pierce Jr. would resonate as a cover athlete.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And for my defensive lineman, I got Mason Graham. Also from Michigan, coming out of the Big Ten. Um, just a great defensive lineman, interior guy, and he's coming back to kind of a rebuilding defense. So I think he's going to be a massive leader, and like I said, just represents the reigning champs.
Yeah, you're killing me with all these Michigan picks, but yeah,
I
Mason
know.
Graham. He ran one of the coolest highlights was when he chased down Katron Allen against Penn State last year. You have Katron Allen running down the field, and here's Mason Graham chasing him down. And he got him, of course. Moving on to linebacker, going Harold Perkins out of LSU. He's been a stud since he's a freshman, and he kind of goes into that mold of kind of the new age linebacker in the NFL. So I could see Harold Perkins Jr. really being on the cover if EA Sports wants to go that way. He's exciting. He makes plays every game. He's all over the field, and he's a big name. He's probably arguably the best returning linebacker in the nation.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you watch football, follow football at all, you know who Harold Perkins is. You've heard of him before, and if you've watched him play, you definitely can see why he would get a spot on the cover. My linebacker choice is Barrett Carter out of Clemson for the ACC. He's a returning senior. He's another one that could have easily been drafted in this year's draft, especially with kind of a light linebacker draft class here in 24. He's going back for his senior year at Clemson. I think that'd be a good representation for the ACC for sure.
Yeah, I don't have anybody from the ACC on my list. I even though we know they're going to do one from every conference. Nobody popped out to me from the ACC at any position really, as far as like returning people that are star power that would help sell the game. I think the ACC is really lacking big names all around.
Yeah, because I think Florida State was the team last year, and they lost so many skill players into the draft and just out of eligibility and the transfer portal and stuff like that. So it was hard to find
Yeah,
an ACC standout.
yeah, and like Clemson should be really good and should be in the discussion for a playoff spot this year. But if you look, you got the quarterback Cade Klubenak, but they don't have a ton of marketable players that are really out there and with their own brand. With EA Sports and being on the cover of the football game, I feel like they're looking for people with name recognition and their own brand power already.
Yeah, I took it as more of Clemson as a brand than the player as a brand.
Right, right.
They want that representation of Clemson. It's a big brand.
Yeah, yeah. Let's move on to the last one, defensive backs. I feel like there's two choices here, really, as far as, like we said, the name recognition, brand. who's going to pop. And I went with Will Johnson on Michigan, even though it hurts my heart to do that. But Will Johnson, he's a stud. He locked down everybody he faced last year, and he could be the first corner picked in next year's NFL draft.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I went with a popularity contest here with Travis Hunter out of Colorado for the Big 12. To me, it is one of the easiest picks to be on the cover just because he plays both ways. He plays wide receiver, he plays DB. Essentially, he is a DB. So I think he's a shoo-in to get it.
Yeah, and just putting Colorado in there with Deion and all the hijinks and shenanigans and only winning 4 games and turning over the entire roster. I mean, it's just going to be name recognition, brand. It's a reality show over there. I mean, they filmed a reality series last year during season for Amazon. So Colorado's going to have big pull. I mean, just look at the TV rankings for those first 4 games. Colorado was the most watched game. So people are familiar with Colorado, and they know Travis Hunter, they know Shador, they know Deion, and hopefully, I mean, they'll take a step forward or not, depending on how you feel about the situation. But if you continue to be 4-8, you're going to get looked more at a laughing stock, and you're going to catch a lot of heat if you don't start winning games.
Yeah, absolutely. But even with that fact, I'm pretty sure the Colorado-Oregon game was one of the most gambled on games last year, even though it was a blowout.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure they lost by like 4 scores, but it still had just money pouring on it just because of Deion.
Oh yeah, I mean, I remember I had Oregon. I was hoping for the downfall of Colorado because I didn't think they were that great. They had, they beat TCU, who, okay, they made the playoffs last year, but they lost everybody, so they weren't that great. Nebraska came in overhyped like usual. Nebraska's still Nebraska. They're not quite there with Matt Rule. I think he's going to get it there, but it wasn't there early last season. And then we're talking about Colorado as being a playoff team. They got ranked. And you looked at their resume, it's like you barely eked out a win against Colorado State. You beat Nebraska, who is a 500 team, and you beat a TCU team that returned nobody from a playoff team last year. So I feel like it got really out of hand, but helped me make some money because, like I said, I bet on Oregon that game. Let's move on forward. Our next segment here, we have Penn State Minute. Me being a Penn State fan, like to every episode incorporate kind of like a Penn State Minute, kind of a state of the program or news that was happening with the program. For this episode, what was not really nice about the NFL draft is it showed that Penn State's super talented, even though they can't get over that hump into the college football playoff. The talent's there. They had the second most picks by a Big Ten team in the NFL draft with 8, only trailing Michigan. So, Penn State, I know Ohio State has a ton of talent that came back, but it's really nice to see how much talent Penn State has, and they continue to churn out NFL talent. Big transfer portal news for Penn State is KLS entered the transfer portal and ended up going to Auburn, which is, kind of funny. Still waiting for Auburn to post the final score there from when Penn State went down there and beat them. But, I mean, this could be, you look at the Penn State receiver room, this could be like an addition by subtraction, just based on some of the rumors that are out there that, he wasn't always the hardest worker. He wasn't always, he took some plays off and just maybe not be the best fit for the wide receiver room. So this could be a addition by subtraction type thing and let some of the younger guys move in and get some more reps and more playing time for a wide receiver room that really needs to step up for its quarterback. And then Penn State had its spring game where over 64,000 people showed up, which ranks in the top 3 or 4 for spring game attendance because Penn State, if we're good at one thing, it's attendance at games. But what really popped off the screen was Abdul Carter's move to defensive end. He was in the backfield all day, making things hard for Drew and Bo. And what jumped out was how fast he was off the ball. He was, he was jumping the snap. I mean, it was ridiculous how quick he was getting off the ball. And it was really cool to see because now you're going to team Abdul Carter up with DDS, who's going to be coming off the edge too. And it's looking like they're going to make it really hard on quarterbacks with the new DC Tom Allen coming in. I don't think we're going to see a big drop off from losing Manny Diaz and the returning talent we have. It looked really good for the spring game for the defensive ends. And now I'll kick it over to you for your Georgia minute.
Yeah. Just a couple of things I wanted to mention about the Penn State thing was I'd be surprised if they didn't try to do a whiteout for a spring game. They're all about their whiteouts over there at Penn State. Actually been to 1 or 2 games or so with you, and it's an experience down there in Happy Valley for sure.
Right, you haven't even been there for the whiteout.
Like I said, wasn't the West Virginia whiteout?
No, that was just a normal crowd.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought that was a whiteout.
No, that was just normal crowd. Normal, crazy Penn State crowd.
Yeah.
Whiteout last year was Iowa in the rain.
Oh, okay. Well, no, actually, remember the West Virginia, it was a stripe.
Yeah, we did the stripe out.
It was a stripe out game.
Yeah.
So you had one little stripe of blue, but it was basically a whiteout.
Yeah, because it wasn't even the stripe out, it was the helmet stripe game.
Yes.
So from the 40 to the 40 was the blue stripe and the rest was white.
Exactly.
Yeah. So go ahead with
like I said,
your Georgia minute here.
As a Georgia fan, like you said, it's always good to see. We've been heavy investing into draft picks. We got 8 draft picks in 2024, which is actually pretty low for the last couple of years, being back-to-back national championships in 21, 22. We've seen a lot of people leave, for sure. Brock Bowers and Mims were the 2 first-round picks this year. And the good news going into 2024, we have about 16 to 17 returning starters. And that is good news for us. I would say I think we returned 14 starters when we won the national championship in 2021. So hopefully it's kind of like a repeat in history type thing. We go get the job done there. We did lose our running backs coach and DB coach to promotions. I believe our running back coach went to Syracuse as their head coach, and our DB coach went to Georgia State, I do believe. That you got to reload the staff too, along with draft picks and players too. The biggest thing would be in recruiting. A lot of position coaches go out and recruit, and they're a big factor in recruiting. So, I would say the key to success going into 2024 for Georgia would be a little bit more aggressive on the offensive side of the ball. You kind of seen them last year be more of a game management team and time management team. Bend don't break on defense. And I mean, they put up points for sure. But I feel like they could be more aggressive and take over the game early. Another thing would be to fix the red zone defense. Kirby Smart has been known for his defenses over the years at Alabama and Georgia. And we ranked in over like plus 100 in red zone defense last year. So I think if they can tighten that up, that will definitely be a difference maker for this upcoming year.
Yeah, I mean, returning that many starters for a team that only lost to Alabama is going to be pretty crazy to see what they do next season. I know their schedule is pretty hard next year. They kind of caught all the big teams for whatever reason in the first year of the expanded SEC. And that the running back coach, Fran Brown, I mean, he was a big recruiter for Georgia. and he's already shown that at Syracuse. He's brought in a pretty good transfer portal class and a pretty good recruiting class for the short amount of time he's been there.
Yeah, absolutely. And the games that Georgia has to circle are traveling to Alabama this year. I think we have to go to Texas as well. Um, and then I think we have to go to Ole Miss too. So that's three really hard road games that they gotta really show up.
Yeah, for sure. So let's jump into our last segment for today: risers and fallers in the SEC. So just some teams that are poised to kind of have a step back as far as last year's season went, and they could be a little worse this year, and some teams that could look to be better or make it over the hump.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll start with kind of an obvious one as kind of a fall is Alabama. They had 10 players drafted in the NFL draft. They are as consistent as any team out there of developing players for the next level. They only returned 10 people, 10 players in 2024. And then obviously you have the major coaching change with Saban retiring. And you don't know how well DeBoer's scheme with the Pac-12 will transition into SEC football. I just think it's too much change, too many players at skill positions. I just don't think they're going to have as good of a year, obviously, as Alabama fans have been accustomed to for the last decade.
Yeah, for sure. I think another team you have to look at there for kind of falling behind last year, even though they weren't exactly, on the fringe of the playoffs or anything, is LSU. Uh, you know, they had 6 players drafted, only returning about 12 or 13 players. And they still were 10-3 last year, even though they weren't really regarded as a playoff contender or that. But you're losing Jaden Daniels, you're losing a ton of talent at pretty much all the skill positions. And then your coach is Brian Kelly, who hasn't exactly won big in the big games. I mean, he did beat Alabama by going for 2 a couple years ago, but I mean, as far as like long-term success and winning in the college football playoff or winning the absolute biggest games, Brian Kelly hasn't exactly proven that he can do that. So I think LSU could be another team that's poised to take a step back.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, with those, 12 or 13 players return, it's like almost split right in the middle of they have to get 5 new starters on offense and 5 new starters on defense. It's not where most of their offense is coming back or most of their defense is coming back. They got to find a lot of replacement starters, and I think that's gonna be hard for them for sure.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, for
I would
sure.
say one of the go ahead.
I was just going to say, I was going to start with the rise and let you kind of take the second rise there. Old Miss, I'm looking at as one of the teams that could finally get over that hump and make their first college football playoff. They're returning a ton of guys, and they won the transfer portal with the amount of guys they got in. They have the number 1 incoming class currently as far as the transfer portal goes, and they've recruited really well lately. NIL is a big factor there, and Ole Miss is on board with NIL, and it's really showing. They have the second easiest schedule in the SEC, so it looks like if you can avoid losing 3 games, go 10-2, or and make the championship game, you're going to be in the playoffs. And Ole Miss to kind of break through that wall there and make their first college football playoff with the expanded field.
Yeah, absolutely. And I kind of compare Ole Miss to Penn State in the Big Ten. They kind of get overshadowed by Michigan and Ohio State, um, but they're right there. They make good. They have good players. Lane Kiffin is players coach, and like you said, this year I think he's pushing all his chips in, and this is the year, and it's a convenient year to do it with the expansion playoffs. So like I've said previously, I think Ole Miss is a shoo-in for a playoff spot for sure.
Yeah, I mean, as long as Lane Kiffin doesn't, turn into a shell of himself in the big games like he did last year. I mean, every big game, his play calling and their offense just wasn't like it was against everybody else. So it was really kind of confusing to see, Lane Kiffin get really conservative and not go for it against the big teams last year. Going back to, how you compare Ole Miss and Penn State, and, two teams that are right on the edge. I wish Penn State would get on the NIL train like Ole Miss. It would be so nice, but that's one area where we're dealing with the old heads and, they're still set in their ways where, we're doing it the Penn State way, which isn't the way to do it anymore.
Yeah, yeah. But like I said, hopefully maybe with the expansion playoffs and if Penn State can, consistently be in the playoffs or, right there in the discussion, maybe that will open up some of the pocketbooks and realize that they just need one more step to be, the top 4 team or, to make a deep run into the playoffs. So hopefully that will happen. Moving forward with another riser, obviously I think is Georgia. Missing the playoffs. They lost to only Alabama in the SEC championship game. I know a lot of people, here Georgia, there's not much more rising that they can do. But it was a big hit last year not making the playoffs. And Kirby Smart takes the SEC championship game very seriously. And I think some of that gets into his play calling as well. And he's not as aggressive as he should be. And I think it kind of hurts him, especially against Nick Saban. But like I said, and what we've said previously, we're returning 16 players. That is huge. We got ETN as an incoming transfer from Florida. I think he is going to be a day one difference maker, being that type of elusive back and a power back with Roderick Robinson. That running back room is very deep, and I'm excited to see that transpire into wins. And like I said, we do have a couple tough road games at Georgia, but like I said, we're favored to win the SEC, and I think Georgia will be a shoe-in for the playoffs as well. Like I said, just with that many returning starters at that program under Kirby Smart, it'd be a huge disappointment if we didn't.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the playoff is now the expectation there at Georgia since Kirby Smart broke through. You're going to have to sick that bulldog on the cat I hear on your mic.
Oh, yeah.
Good old Sammy back there. I can hear her meowing. But yeah, Georgia, I mean, like you said, how much more can you rise? But when you miss out on the playoffs, when you're the back-to-back national title, it is a disappointment. And you'd look to make that next step up. So that'll conclude the show today. Episode 2 of our show here. I can be found on Twitter at AndyAdare17. And Jay can be found at Jazzy_bets on Twitter. And you can find the show BIGXSEC on Twitter. Thanks for watching. Subscribe, like, and review. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.